All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November Astronomical Imaging Special Interest Group. As we do most months, take a chance for any new members or folks who haven't participated with us before to take a second to introduce themselves. Any new members want to speak up?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm new. My name's Rob West, and been into astro imaging for a long time, but well, started a long time ago, but just getting back to it recently. So I'm recently retired and just moved to Tucson last 6 months or so.
Welcome.
Welcome. Were
Thanks.
you the Rob West that wrote the article about using a cookbook CCD back in the late 90s?
I'm surprised you would remember that, but yeah, that was me.
Well, you got me started on this crazy journey.
Uh-oh.
Wow. Cool.
It's nice to meet you, Rob.
Thank you.
Rob, what part of town do you live in?
I live over in Tucson Estates too, so I'm kind of out towards Tucson Mountain Park.
Very good. Welcome to Tucson. You'll love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I really do like it out here.
Anyone else? All right. And again, the first part of our meeting every month is what we call the beginner's corner. So if you have a question that you might think is a beginner's type question, this is your chance to spit it out, and we'll see if it's a beginner's question or not. Any beginner's questions?
Ah, boy.
No beginner's questions this month. Okay.
Rob, you got something on your mind?
Um, I don't know how what kind of questions you're but what I've been thinking about, since I'm new, I just joined the club and interested in being able to use the dark sky sites. So I guess my all my questions are going to revolve around how do I get checked out to do that?
So, Rob, if you go back, we have a YouTube channel for the TAAA, and all of these meetings get posted there.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of years, but we did a program on what do you need to know before you go to CAC. I don't recall it spending much time on TIMP. It was mostly about CAC, which is the one near the Chiricahuas.
Right. And that's the one I'm really interested in.
So that you might, as a starting point, you might take a look at that. And then beyond that, man, just post questions on the Groups IO chat board, and got lots of people here who have been to CAC many times and will gladly answer your questions.
For one.
Yeah, sounds good. And I've been looking at some of the videos and whatnot, and so I'm actually planning on going on the trip that's coming up next week.
Yeah, I think all of the information you need about signing up to get trained is on the TAAA website. If you go there, they have all of the information and the sign-up forms that you need to fill out before you make your first trip there.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Any other beginner stuff? All right. Well, if there's no other beginner questions, I'm
Greg,
going to
maybe a quick announcement.
Oh, okay.
For those of you who are regulars on the forum, you saw that about 10 days ago, I posted a survey about a possible AISIG get-together at CAC in the springtime. And I actually haven't looked at it in a couple of days, but the initial response has been very favorable. So I think it is safe to say that we're going to form a little team in the next few weeks to start planning something. Craig Harding made the point that April's a lot better than March as a rule. It could get really cold at CAC through the winter time. So the April new moon is comfortably away from Easter and Passover. We're probably going to start working on a program. The idea would be we'd have 2 nights at CAC, and Rob, for your benefit, there's sleeping quarters there with I think 10 bedrooms. They are Spartan. Is that fair? You bring your own sleeping bag or sheets and blanket, bedroll, whatever you like. But they're air conditioned and heated, bathrooms that are clean. And it works really, really well. There's also tent camping available. There's motorhome hookups. So there's lots of ways to stay there. But the idea would be we'd have 2 nights, and then during that one full day when we're there, we will put together some programming, some opportunities. If a bunch of us are there to see one another's rigs and have a kind of an open house thing. Those are the kinds of ideas that we're kicking around. But stay tuned, and if you haven't filled out the survey yet, please go find the link to it on the forum and respond to the survey by next Friday, if you would.
Great. Okay. I think I saw David Stern pop up here a little bit ago. So David, if you're ready to go,
Sure.
We're anxious to hear about this new scriptlet creator that's available in PixInsight. So feel
Great.
free to take it away. You have as much
Okay.
time as you need.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share my desktop. And let's see. Can you folks see my PixInsight screen now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just getting things arranged here so I don't have to see everybody staring at me when I'm doing this. So thanks for having me over to do this. I get a lot of questions regarding, the Bill Blanshan processes and scripts that have been out for a while. And for those of you who don't know about Bill Blanshan, he's been writing pixel math scripts for several years. And he's based in Texas. He's done a great job of unrolling scripts. When I first started my astrophotography journey a little over 3 years ago, I wanted to try to figure out how can I make one of those really colorful Hubble palette type images that we're all familiar with. And I just started scurrying the internet and searching YouTube, and I came across Bill Blanshan's new scripts. And at the time, they were brand new. They were kind of like the starting point for him to come out and provide these scripts for taking like a one-shot color set of images and making them into a Hubble-like palette. Very easy to use, very sophisticated, and they've evolved over time. But most recently, Bill has teamed with a person you may be familiar with already called Mike Cranfield. I believe he's from the UK. And they teamed up and they created a whole new way of developing scripts, taking existing pixel math scripts and providing a front end user interface to them with different options. And for those of you who have used PixInsight for a while, you may have scripts that you use today. You know, and I know that when you use those scripts, there might be some variables there that you can change. It might be, your background, like in a curve type stretch. You might want to change certain things to make it brighter or darker, or add saturation to an image. Or if you're using an HA script, one of the older HA scripts, you could change how much HA you would add to an RGB image. These are all variables that you could change in the script, but in order to do that, you had to go into the pixel math code, make the changes to that, and then run the script. And if you didn't like it, you had to go back and change the amounts again of the variables, and so forth and so on. So there was a lot of issues with it. And the scripts are very effective, but it might take you a few times to get it right. So with this PixelmathUI that I'll be showing you the scriptlets, the actual scripts that were automated through this process. you'll see that there are a lot of different options. You have a real-time preview, you have the ability of using sliders and checking off features and checking features back on, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. It's a very easy way to use or consume scripts. It's also very easier for someone who's developing pixel math or trying to repurpose pixel math scripts to add more functionality to it without having to go back and changing everything every time they want to make a change. So it's good for pixel math developers. It's also good for people like me who don't like anything with the word math associated with it, who just like to use these tools. Um, in order to get the pixel math script installed, I'm going to go. Can everybody see my browser now with the YouTube
Yep.
on it? Great. So there are a couple ways you can get to it. The easiest way is just to go to YouTube, look up Bill's site, which is another Astro channel. You may be subscribed to it already. And below here, you'll see the PixelmathUI script. You just click on that, it'll take you to the browser, you copy it. There's also the option of buying, supporting both Mike Cranfield and Bill Blanshan and buying them a cup of coffee, just a way of like giving them a little stipend for their work. I've done it multiple times, and I would encourage you, if you decide to use any of the scripts in the future or using PixelMath UI, using the scriptlets, that you do that because they do this stuff for free and they spend a lot of time and effort to develop these scripts. It's not an easy task. But as you can see here, these are all the different YouTubes that are on Bill's channel that you can look at. He has very early versions of these scripts that I'll be showing you today in this demonstration tutorial I'll be going through. So is everybody here who uses PixInsight, are you familiar with how to go into resources or and add the script to it, or should I show you briefly how to do that? Yes, no?
I know.
Show us how.
Okay, great. So what you would do is you go to Pixel the website, and by the way, there is a separate site that Mike Cranfield put together called cosmicphotos.com. So you can go directly there as well. So you can get to it in multiple ways. And if you're familiar with generalized hyperbolic stretch and some of the other tools that are on PixInsight, Mike was involved with that. He's also collaborated with people like Adam Block and other people that you may be familiar with in the astronomy world. So I would click on this and you'll see now it's not bringing you to a website, just showing you the link. From here, I would just go ahead and edit, copy the link, go down to PixInsight, go ahead and go to resources, go to man updates and then manage repositories. Then you would go here and click on add, Control V to paste it. I already have it on here, but you would just go ahead and add it. Then you would go ahead and you would go back to resources, go to updates, check for updates. Once it updates your repository, you would log out of PixInsight, bring PixInsight back up, and then it'll ask you if you want to install the updates, and you go from there. Then you have it installed. So when you're in your PixInsight screen, you go to scripts, you'll see Cosmic Photons if you installed it, and then you select PixelMath UI. And this is the interface, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh this because I already had a previous script that I was using before, but first thing out of the gate, when you bring it up, this is what you're going to see. And I'll go through some of the functions here, but some of these are built in and baked into the PixelMath UI. But when you'll see when we go into the actual scriptlets themselves, how these things function and are different things you can do in terms of previewing the image, making changes to the image, and so forth, and seeing them in a real-time preview. Now, again, I'm not into writing pixel math. I'm more of a consumer of it. So if you go here to the bottom where it says load scriptlets, it's a little upward pointing caret. Click on this, and now you'll see, can everybody see where it says launch scriptlet?
Yep.
Good. So these are all the scriptlets that Bill Blanshan wrote. And you can see there's probably about 15 to 20 different scriptlets he's written here. Some of these are based off of old scripts that he's written, and he's repurposed them or modernized them, and some are just brand new. So you can see here, you have all these different scripts you can use. Also, Mike Cranfield has a library of scripts. And if you decide, if you're good at pixel math and you want to create your own scripts or bring some of your old scripts in, you could set up a library of your own scripts as well. So I could have like my scriptlets, which you could see I don't have any. So going back to this, if I want to bring up a script, let's say I want to use the combination one-shot color HOO SSO images, which will combine two master lights that are HOO and SSO that you can use for doing an SHO or HSO type image. You would just click on this. It would say, do you want to launch it? And now here you have the screen. Here's the way it was set up. It asks you for a target view, so I can pick one of these master lights if I want. And that would be typically for the target view on this one, you want to select your HA03, which would be the rosette taken with the I-NBZ UHS filters. That's the way I named the icon on the image. And then you could pick your, with the ASCAR D2, I was able to capture S3 or S2 and O3 bandwidths, and I would combine those together. And I'll show you how that works later on. There are also different parameters you can select depending on how they wrote the script. So here I can select to have an output of an image that's SHO or HSO. And also I can choose to use SHO luminance for this particular script. And then another thing that's important to be aware of is output. The default on this, because I'm combining two master lights together and trying to create a whole new one, is to create a new image. However, a lot of them will just take your existing image and replace it with the new modification. But if you don't want to do that and you want to be able to save it or compare it to the original image, then you could just override it by checking that and say create new image, and it will do that for you as well. And then up here on the top is the preview option area. You could choose the preview or not preview the option or the image itself, or do a before and after. You can select a clip point in certain processes or scripts that might come in handy. And then very important, it'll default in many cases to a typical stretch preview, whether it's linked, off, or unlinked, depending on what you're doing and what scriptlet you're using. But in some cases, you might have to change it on your own. But regardless, this is for previews only. So it's not going to affect the outcome of your image when you're done processing it. It's just going to give you a preview, just to let you know. Now, the thing is, to go to, the menu of scriptlets and pick each one out individually takes a few clicks, takes a few steps, and it creates more time. So what you can do for any of these scripts in the script library, all you do is drag your little left arrow caret here, and now you have a process. I can get rid of this, and then I can go ahead and I can hit Control, set icon identifier, and I can set it up to label it any way I want to so I know what it's for. And as you can see, right here on this screen on the right, I've set up a bunch of scripts already that I'm going to use for this presentation for this particular image set, along with my other process icon shortcuts that I've set up. And all I have to do then is drag them over to the image. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. I'm going to get rid of this. So for this example, I'm going to show you my typical processing workflow now. If I'm going to do an SHO image and I've taken two sets of data, creating two master lights through PixInsight WBPP using two different narrowband filters. So this one, obviously, if you've used an HA and O3 filter in the past, This is the Rosette Nebula taken with, this is last year. I took it with my IDAS NBZ UHS filter using my C8 Hyperstar configuration. And then this was my ASCAR D2 filter, which allows you to isolate the S2 and the O3. So I get a lot of O3 as a byproduct of this, along with adding the S2. And I've done this with a one-shot color camera, which happens to be my 2600 MC Pro. So what I used to have to do prior to these scriptlets being available, I used to have to go and run star alignment, which I still would have to run. I did it for both these images, and I used the target or the actual master as my NBZ filter. But you have to do the star alignment first, because when you're taking two different filters in different nights, you're going to find they may not align exactly. So do your star alignment first. And then after I did my star alignment, I would go ahead and run a utility called DB extract, which is a free script, and that would extract the S, H, and O from both of these images. And all you do is define, tell it what filters you're using, what your sensor is, and then click and it runs. And it did a very good job of extracting the SHO images. Then from there, I would typically go to each individual channel or image set, and I would go ahead and do any gradient correction that was needed. I would do it a minimum blur exterminator using correction only. And then from there, I would have to go ahead and do channel combination and use SHO or HSO, however I'm doing it, within channel combination. From there, I have to do background neutralization, or actually, I would sharpen the stars first, doing a full sharpen with blur exterminator. Then I would have to remove the stars using star exterminator. You get my drift here? There's a lot of steps I would typically have to do. So I was able to cut about 4 to 6 different steps out by using this process, which I'm going to demonstrate to you. So what I showed you before, the the combination HOO, SOOSC, I have that already as a shortcut. And to use any of the shortcuts that you create, all you have to do is drag and drop it to an image. In this case, I'm dropping it to the HA03 image. It's going to go ahead and bring up the scriptlet. And you're probably wondering, why do we call them scriptlets? Why don't we call them script? That's a term that Bill Blanshan and Mike Cranfield came up with it because we're talking about using a script within a script. So they thought it'd be kind of cute to use the term scriptlet. So that's what they use. Now, from here, I also need to define what my SSO image is. And we know that already. It's the D2 registered image. And now you should see now that it's showing me a linked STF preview of what this image looks like at this point. Now, I also now have the option of selecting SHO, or if you prefer, SHO. And if you want to use the SHO luminance, you would just select this box here, and it would show it with the luminance. In this case, for our purposes, we're going to show it as SHO. The output, as I said, is already set up as create new image. So now all I have to do is hit my little checkbox here, and it's doing all that work that I would normally have to do manually. And just to let you know, I had images here that I downsized through resampling. So they're not the best resolution, but because I'm on an iMac M1, I didn't want to waste a lot of time by waiting for these things to conclude. So I think you'll get the idea of what you can accomplish without having to use full resolution images. So I did downsize those and resample them down as best I could to do that. Another thing I want to show you is, if I go to PixelMath here, for those of you who like to use PixelMath, I can launch the interface now. And I'm going to get out of this so you can see it. If you want to see the PixelMath code that was used behind the scenes for this, This is it right here. And you can go ahead and you can scroll down and see all the work that was done via the pixel math. You can make changes to it if you want to. I personally am not going to do it, but if you wanted to do that, you can make changes to the scripts just to give you an idea of what this is capable of doing. So now, at this point, I'm going to bring up STF. This is showing the stretch. You could show it unlinked as well. And this, again, it's just a preview showing me what we're dealing with here. So I'm going to get rid of the master lights here for now, because that takes up additional memory, and I don't want to have to risk pixel math crashing, because again, I'm on an M1 chipset, and when you're dealing with really large file sizes like I'm dealing with today, the M stands for molasses. It gets really slow, really fast, so you have to watch it. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and relabel this, and you'll see why I'm doing that. PMUI is just, Pixel Math User Interface. That's what it stands for. But I'm going to change this to Rosette, and I'm going to call it SHO. So this is the image. As you can tell, I even expand. It's not that big because it's resampled down. And my next step is going to be to run Blur Exterminator. I've already done correction with it already, and now I'm going to go ahead and use Blur Exterminator. And you may have heard me say this multiple times. With a narrowband image like this, or any narrowband image, you're not going to run SPCC. And when I get to stretching it, we're going to do an unlinked stretch. Because if you run SPCC and you use a link stretch, then it kind of defeats the purpose of what we're going to do when we create the actual SHO image. So next step after this, I've sharpened the stars. I've also used the PSFs, and I've sharpened the nebulosity behind the scenes. I'm now going to create or remove the stars from this image temporarily until we rescreen them back. And I'm doing this on the linear image, not the nonlinear image, because I'm going to show you in the final step of the process how we can take nonlinear stars and bring them into a narrowband image without even using RGB stars. So this particular thing, I'm going to put this to the side with the stars. Now you can see we have the image. As you can tell, it's still not stretched yet. So how would I normally stretch this? In the past, before I had these scriptlets, I would use another script that Bill Blanshan had set up. It's a simple script that allows you to go ahead and change the image into a nonlinear image using a linked or an unlinked option, depending on which script version you use. And again, because we're going to do narrowband normalization, I'm going to choose unlinked. But with this one, I just go to my simple stretch script, easy for me to say. Now I'm going to bring this up, and you can see it's more than just a line of scripts or a line of code. This gives you a lot of different options. So I can choose whether I'm going to do a linked or an unlinked stretch. If I choose linked, it's going to be, again, all green. That's normal. It sets the target background to 2 because most of the time when you're doing an STF or using a standard stretch, it's going to default to 2.5. And the problem with that is if you have any areas here like the O3 area could be prone to getting blown out, you want to keep this at 0.20. I've experimented different ways. And I could bring it up a little bit if I want. But now, as you can see, it's starting to blow things out. And you don't want to do that. You can use GHS later if you want, or use histogram transformation, but you really want to watch that. I could add saturation now if I want to. In Bill's demo, he does show that. But I prefer to wait until I've normalized the data and got it into the palette I want, and then I'll use masking to do any sort of additional saturation. And then it has highlight protection. And I have worked with this image enough to know that I need to knock it down just a hair so you could see, oh, oops, I missed that there, but you could see before and after. If I just kept it where it was, like this at the default, you see how much brighter it is? That's going to get even brighter when I play with the luminance in the next step that I'll show you later. So I'm going to leave this the way it is. And oh, by the way, one other thing I forgot to show you is if you want to zero in on a region, you just drag and drop with your mouse, and now it gives you an expanded preview. So you can really get a good idea of what's happening when you're working with the image. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit the checkbox. And this will take just a moment or two. Now it's done. And now I'm going to reset it. And here's the actual SHO image that's been stretched now at this point. Any questions so far? Okay. Must be doing a good job of explaining it. Excuse my dog in the background. The next step I typically do after I stretch, I typically apply some noise reduction. And as you can see, because this is resampled, it doesn't look the best. You don't get as much detail. But again, we're just doing this for demonstration purposes. I'll go in and I'll use Noise Exterminator. And I'm using the latest version, which is version 3. I'm going to put this one back. And typically I'll use the defaults, or I might tone it down to like 80. The latest version of Noise Exterminator is very good at getting rid of the noise without getting rid of any of the details or the sharpness of the image. So I'm just going to go about it this way, which is the normal way that I process. Okay, so Noise Exterminator is completed. Now that I've done that, what I would typically do before I go into narrowband normalization, which is a standard way we've used in the past, I would have to go ahead to do a background normalization. But in this case, I don't have to. I'm going to run the SHO colorization script by dragging and dropping it. Okay, so now you can see the difference, right? This is before, this is after, just by dragging and dropping it to the image. One thing I want to point your attention to in each one of these scriptlets, Bill has done a very good job of giving a brief description of the actual scriptlet itself and what the different options are that you can use. Here he's explaining you can colorize mono data, but in this case, we're using one-shot color data that was split up into SHO. But the same thing would apply if you're using mono cameras now and you're using different narrowband filters. This process would work with them just as well as it would work with a one-shot color image. He already does the background neutralization, so I don't have to bother with that before I get into the script. And he's also introduced some other features that I'll go into later, but it's all explained here. There have been no new videos out, unfortunately, for how to use these different scriptlets, but I've been able to learn them on myself just by looking at the description and playing around with them. And I've become very familiar with all these scriptlets that I use, at least for the moment. There is the option to use called colorized all. That means as opposed to doing your standard narrowband normalization and doing what you normally do if you're using linear fit, which is what the luminance is for, not all images have HA to do normalization with. Some of them, like the Dolphin Head Nebula, are strictly O3. So what do you do with that? Well, that's why it gives you the option to do colorization. And you can go ahead and you can change things for this. So for example, I can boost the S2, and I can also change the hue angle if I want. So I can actually play with the hue, or I could bring it down if I want. There are different things you could do here for each one of these things. I don't usually do that. I just use the the normalized SHO, but there are other different options you can use if you just want to colorize each area of the image. I'm going to set this up to use background neutralization, and I'm going to set it up to use narrowband normalization. And again, you'd normally, if you were doing this manually in PixInsight, you'd go into linear fit and you would choose HA to normalize your S and S2 and your O3, but in this case, you don't have to do it. Now, even right now, this image looks pretty decent. Now, because I'm using nonlinear, it defaults to that. But if you decided that you want to use linear data and process that within this scriptlet, it works for both linear and nonlinear data. Personally, my experience is I get better results with the nonlinear data. Don't ask me why, I just do. You'll also notice here on the fringe areas or the corners of the image, you see a little bit of a reddish area here beyond just the nebulosity. It's kind of bleeding over. I'm going to go ahead and magnify that a little bit. And what you have the option of doing here is getting rid of some background noise. And I do this very frugally. I don't go really crazy about it. But if you can look at this, this is before, and hopefully you can see this on your screen through Zoom, after it's brought down just a little bit. And I might just bring it down a little bit further. And we'll bring up the full image. As you can see, it's less red in this case. If I go ahead and set it to the default, you have more of a bleed out here. So I'll just adjust it ever so slightly if I need to do that. You do have the option of adjusting the signal for S2, HA, and O3. So if I want to bring this up just a little bit, I can do that. I could do the same thing with HA. As you can see, this is more of a teal green or teal blue as opposed to a blue blue. When you do this, you're using false color, obviously, because you're flipping everything with SH and O compared to RGB. And those are typically what they call false colors. You're making it even more falser if you change the signals. So I might do a little tweaking just from an artistic license standpoint, but realize you're not going to get a true Hubble-like, air quotes, SHO image if you start playing with the signals. So if you want to be completely pure about your SHO, then you leave them as is and you don't change them. But there's nothing to stop you. It's your image. I typically would change them just a little bit because usually there's less S2 in the image. If I want to bring that out, I'll do that. And with the HA, as opposed to getting a purple blue or a blue blue, I could tweak this if I want, just to give it more of a teal type color. If you try to use these channel adjustments when you're in normalized SHO, you're going to find they do not do anything to the image. They do not affect it because I'm not using colorized all, or I'm not colorizing a specific channel like S2, HA, or O3. So these really don't have anything to do with what you're doing. I know we're all probably familiar with SCNR and what that does to an image. It's supposed to reduce the noise of the green channel typically, but many of you may have already seen the video that Frank from SETI Astro just published about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, talking about the dangers of using SNR and how it reduces the signal. This is Bill Blanshan's version of SCNR, but it's a modified version. And what this will do is it'll reduce the green channel noise, but it won't reduce the signal. And he has a new way of doing this called hybrid. There is also average, which is typical for the SCNR that you would use in PixInsight. There's max, but I find the hybrid works rather well. And I know some people like to keep the green in because, it's hydrogen, and that's the green channel, right? But I'm not a big fan of green necessarily. So I'm going to drop this down a little bit. In fact, I might bring it up all the way. As you can see, you should see it hopefully on your Zoom. You can see that the green has been reduced somewhat. You also have the choice of reducing the magenta. By default, I typically do both because I don't like magenta in my images and I don't like a lot of green in the image either. And then at this point, you have the choice of how you want to set your luminance. Typically, if it's a typical SHO image and you have HA that's predominant in the image, I usually select HA. If you're using this in a linear fashion, though, you want to keep this as off. So just be aware of that. If you're using it in linear, turn it off. If you're using nonlinear, keep it as HA. And you can see a little bit of a difference here. But I'm going to reduce this S2 a little bit because it's making my image a little bit too green. I prefer this going with this method. I could also adjust up the O3 if I want. Again, it's your choice, your image. You do what you want to do with it. So that's how I can easily create it. I did spend more time explaining it than when I do it, but I'm going to go ahead and check it off at this point. Takes a little longer for this one to end because it's doing a lot of things. And always wait till these light up again on the output section. When that below that, when it lights up, that means it's completely done. Okay, so this is it. This was before, and this is after. So one thing that I do, and I get out of the scriptlets to do this, I'm a big fan of GHS. I love using GHS. This was another Mike Cranfield product, but I will typically go into GHS and I'll look at the histogram. I do the same thing in Photoshop or Lightroom when I'm using my regular images that I've taken with my digital SLR camera as well. But one thing I've been trained to do in photography is look at the histogram. If you have a lot of space here, this means there's a lot of detail that can be brought out. And if any of you saw the image I processed today, M45, this made all the difference for me. When I moved the histogram to the left, I had a lot more room to bring out the details, and that's why I was able to get more nebulosity. Otherwise, it's all hidden. You're not going to see it. So I'll typically go here and I could do the same thing in curves, but I find I have a little more control with GHS. It's very easy to use. I'll use this little caret. I could use the black point as well, but I just find just by moving this here with the preview, you don't want to go crazy. Otherwise you start clipping stuff, and you'll notice under black point, under transformation, there's low clip. You don't want to clip your image. But even with that, you still want to go by what you see visually. You don't want to rely on the numbers. So I'll bring this in just a tad. But again, I don't want to clip it so much, even though it's not registering as clipped on the display here. I'm just going to go in just a little like that to do that. Because I've always been taught that light illuminates and shadows define. And if your image is too light in the background, then you lose a lot of detail. I could also, if I want to, go ahead and bring up the white point a little bit too. And this is typically what I'll do in Lightroom. Those are the first two things that I'll adjust. So I'll do that as well. So I could do that, but there are other ways I can handle that. And I'm going to show that to you later on. I get done with this. Okay, so this was before GHS, after GHS. So at this point now, I'm ready to add some saturation. Now, I think many of you have probably done this already. When you're going to saturate, you don't want to saturate the background of your image. You want to create a mask, and there are different ways to do that, to apply a mask. You can use Bill's color mask routines, like what you see here that I'm pointing at, the red mask, yellow mask, and so forth. And those will do a decent job. Or you can do what's called a gradient mask, where you're looking at the entire image and you're only dealing with the details, not the background. Bill came out with a new mask option or a saturation method, and I'm going to bring that up. It's saturation via HSV. Don't ask me what that is, with masking version 4. And this script allows you to adjust the color calibration via the HSV color space, which is an excellent way to saturate colors by preventing clipping. I also added a mask so the color saturation can only be done to mask areas and not areas within the shadows, i.e. space. So this saves you about 2 or 3 steps right there just by bringing this scriptlet up. So if you want to see, you can see the mask. You can shut the mask on or off if you want. I can click on Show Mask. And see, this is something you would normally have to do manually in PixInsight. And there are ways that help you do it, but it's just another step you don't have to do. And if I wanted to, well, I have this mask that I'm showing, I can change this and I could spread the mask out more if I want, or just leave it at the default. I could add more blur. There's a lot of things I could do, but I find just using the defaults is good enough here. So I'm going to go ahead, and right now it's at saturation 5. If I were to bring this all the way to the left, it would be monochrome. And I find that less is more. So like anything, you don't want to go crazy. I'll adjust it a little bit up just to add a little more color, a little more punch to the image. You don't want to move it all the way here, and now you have a really garish image, right? So just a little bit. I can either use the slider itself. If I want to do it really in a fine method, I'll just click on this, and now I can, as I click on the bar, see how it's moving up. And this is all I might want to do. So before and after without going crazy. And then I can go ahead and check it. And it'll apply to the image. There are some other things you can do as well. I'm not going to go into all the details, but if you have an image that has especially like a core of a galaxy, or M42 is a good example of that. There, when you go and you stretch the image using simple stretch, you can really bring that brightness down using the highlight option. There's also the ability of doing what's called HDR. I'm not going to do it for this image. I might show it for the next one. But that gives you a nice way to set up in a non-destructive way using HDR in the image to tone down just the bright areas. Because when you use that particular option, it will create a mask of the bright areas only, the brightest images in the image itself. So my final part for this particular image is screening stars. Remember, I subtracted the stars out. I'm going to go ahead now and apply screen stars. This is a script that Bill's had for a while. It just has a new interface to it and a couple other features to it. So now it shows the target view is Rosette SHO. I'm going to add the stars to it. As you can see, no stars have been added. And the reason is because it gives you the option of adding linear stars. So I'm going to click this, and here you go. Here are your stars. In addition to this, there was another script that Bill wrote where you could reduce the size of your stars, change the saturation. It's all built into the scriptlet, so you don't have to go and use another script to do it. So, for example, let's say I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in on this area here. I could either increase the star size if you prefer your stars to be larger, or I could reduce the star size. So, depending on what your preference is, you can just leave it by the default. I can decrease the saturation, or if I want to, I can increase the saturation. So again, that's your preference. And the nice thing about this script, because we're taking stars that were from narrowband channels, we can remove the green and the magenta stars. Now, there's scripts that have been out there for a while that will allow you to do that. But this is all built into it. So I can check or uncheck this. I usually leave it checked. And then I'll go ahead and apply it. And if you had a string of weather like we're having now, and you were only able to capture the narrowband images, and you didn't have time or you couldn't get RGB stars, this is a good way to do it. Ideally, if you have a set of RGB stars, that's the best solution. But we can't always do that. So this is just another way of doing it. An example is when I go to Telescope Live and I'm downloading some of their data that's narrowband, they're typically not including the RGB stars. So I have to work with what they give me, and that's how I've been able to add the stars to the image. So
Hey, Dave, let me pose a question. I'm curious.
Sure.
When you ran Star Exterminator earlier in the demo,
Mhm.
you did not check unscreened stars,
Yes.
but you rescreened them using the screening process.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Well, the reason I didn't check
what's your thinking there?
the reason I didn't check unscreened stars is that you're not supposed to do that with a linear image. That's only applicable to non-linear, and it's actually in the documentation when you do a mouse over of Star Exterminator for linear, for unscreened, it'll say only use that for a non-linear image. So that's the reason I didn't do that. But SETI Astro also has an ability to do that through one of his scripts that you may or may not be familiar with, and that has the ability of doing a similar thing.
I mean, the formula for screening and unscreening stars is very, very simple.
Mhm.
When you actually look at the pixel math, you go, oh, well, that's not so complicated.
Yeah. Well, there are some things. I think if you were to look at the, let's look at the screen stars for this. Oops. I'm going to bring this up. And I'll just bring it up I'm not going to screen anything here, obviously. But let's look at the pixel math that Bill wrote for this one. And again, this is, I'm not sure what it's going to bring up. Nope, didn't bring it up. Let me see if I can do that again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Pixel Math, and I'm going to go ahead and launch the Pixel Math interface. There you go. And I'll get rid of this. So this is the Pixel Math that Bill wrote. And it's, as you can see, it's not a simple line
The
of script.
screening in there's a lot going on here besides screening.
Yeah, he's doing a lot more than just a simple combine, whatever, right? And especially because of the fact that he's giving you the option of taking linear or non-linear stars. And he's giving you the ability of taking standard RGB stars and adding it to an SHO image, or taking narrowband stars and moving those into a narrowband.
No, so my point was a simpler one, which is if you look at Bill's or SETI's just of basic pixel math expression to screen stars, it's like 2 lines.
Right. Yeah, it probably is, but there's a lot
very,
more.
very simple.
There's a lot more to it than that when you have different types of stars like this. So, anyways, that's that image. Now, the next image I'm going to show you is the North American Nebula and the Pelican Nebula that I shot recently using my SQA55 setup. And with that particular image set, I was able to capture some RGB stars.
David, before you get going, I'd like
Sure.
to ask a question. Just
Sure.
for clarification, the only processing you did to your 2 master files to start with was align stars. Other than that, they're not processed at all.
Yes, I did star alignment, and I also ran, before I ran star alignment, on each master light, I ran blur exterminator correct only.
Okay.
On both of those.
Other than that, they're just they're just linear images with just those 2 things done.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to actually go ahead and close this out. And this part won't take long at all once we get into it. I finally discovered how to use projects this past year because I'm also a member of the AAA New York Astrophotography Club, and they have 2 remote sites. And they like to go really deep when they take their images, and they're huge. 45 hours on an image. And what I found was my little iMac M1 can't handle it typically. So I've always saved them as projects as I go along in case I lose it. I can always recover. But I found it's very handy also when you want to have some preset scenarios like this. So this is just taking about a few seconds to bring it up. Okay, so what I also wanted to show you that each image is different and you're going to process each one differently, right? So here's an example of, well, let me go back here. So this is the narrowband shoot. Sorry about that. This is the narrowband image that I processed using the SHO colorization script and all the other things I just showed you, right? So this is what I did with the North American Nebula and the Pelican Nebula so far. But now I want to do a couple more things with the image. And this is the type of image that lends itself to those processes or scripts. I also took RGB images using my same setup. And what I did was I have a starless version and one with stars, and they ran through SPCC and all the things you would typically do with a broadband image. And that's about the extent of it. I ran blur exterminator, things you would typically do, right? Noise exterminator, all those good things. But I'm going to put these back to where they were. We're going to show you how I use those later. Okay, so at this point, you can see there are some areas here. Let's go and look in here. If you go to the Cygnus wall, there are some areas here that have some highlights to them that I would like to see a little more definition. And there's also some dark matter or dark nebulosity here in the image as well that I would also like to enhance. So the first thing I'm going to do is adjust the glow. And there have been scripts out there before that do glow type capabilities or glow effects. I'm going to show you this one that I really like. And it's Bill Blanshan's glow effect. So what you can see here is just by using the default, I'm going to go a little further in this. Here we go. This is before, this is after with the glow effect. So I can add 4 different stages of glow. What it says here, it's using the image itself as a mask and also uses an internal high pass filter to regain detail after blurring. The script was designed for nonlinear images, but may work on linear images as well. But it focuses on adding the glow effect to the highlights only using a multi-stage blur screening technique. So if I want to, there's 4 different stages. I can add another stage. And if you can see, it'll add, if I switch it back to stage 1, look at where the blue area is. It's a little more toned down, but I typically find that stage 1 is fine. If I want to raise the opacity a little bit and let more of this effect through, I can do that. And it gets a little bit brighter, but I just prefer the defaults on this. And I use this a lot. In a lot of my images, you're going to see this effect. To me, it gives like a 3D effect to it. Because again, this is just stage 1 blur. No additional stages applied. Opacity built in at 50, before and after. It adds a little more pop to it. That's what I like about this particular scriptlet. You do have the option of adjusting the high pass filter, but typically I'll just leave it at the default and go with that. So after I've adjusted this, I'll wait till this finishes up. and I'll bring this out. I discovered this just by just playing around with this stuff. I decided when the scriptlets came out, when I found out they were available, I was going to see how far I could push these scriptlets in doing my overall processing and do minimal processing using the standard PixInsight scripts and processes. So I discovered this little guy here called dark structure. So I'm going to bring this over. And if I zoom in here, this is just at the defaults. This is before, and again, hopefully you can see it on your zoom. And this is after, just with the standard default at 0.5. I could bring this up. As you can see, it goes up even more now. But I found that too much it just kind of makes it look fake, right? You want to, even though it's a false color image, you want to have some sense of realism with these things. So I try not to go overboard. Um, but this, again, he has a description here. You can read it on your own. Gives you some hints on how to use it. It has obviously black point protection as well. These are very well thought out scriptlets. And even though there are other scripts that have been written in the past that might do similar things, I'll tell you the one takeaway I found from using Bill Blanshan scripts over the past 3.5 years is it's scripts, but it's at another level. He takes a lot of care to really think this stuff through before he just pumps the stuff out and releases it to the general astro public. So I'm going to go with the standard on this one. And then we'll get to the finale once this is done. So you can see, let's go back in time. This is before the dark structure enhancement, bringing it back. This is before the glow. I think it adds something that's worthy of this image. So the next step is adding RGB stars to a narrowband image. Bill had an earlier an earlier script that did this, but it was a more complex to work with. With this one, it's extremely easy to work with. I'll go ahead and, by the way, these shortcuts I set up, when you set up a shortcut like this, if there's an update to the scriptlets or to the PixelmathUI in general, any updates to it, it will not be applied to these shortcuts. So do be aware of that. If there are updates to it, you're probably going to have to redefine these at some point. Okay, so here it's showing me the SHO image without stars. It's asking me to select the image with stars. And then it wants me to select the starless image. So what it's doing is it's taking the RGB stars, it's using the color attributes from the RGB image, and it's blending them into the narrowband image. And how many times you've seen a narrowband image when you can tell they use narrowband stars because they're all bluish in color? This is not the case. You can see here when I look at, let's take this area for example. I mean, to me, this looks completely natural, how these stars are blended into the various parts of the image. Again, this is the same scriptlet that I used before. It's just using the different options depending on the type of image. So at this time, I could, if I want to make them a little bit smaller, I can do that or leave it at default. Because I added saturation as part of my stretch with the RGB version itself, it by default brings the saturation all the way down. If you want, you can up the saturation of stars, but again, as long as you're adding some saturation to the RGB image before you remove the stars, then you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. Also, I have the option of removing, and I forgot to check this, removing the green and magenta stars from it. So again, I'm going to go ahead and check this. And that's the image with the RGB stars. And I am done. Any questions?
Dave, really, really nice job.
Well
And
done.
I certainly second your view of the contributions that Bill Blanshan and Mike Cranfield have made to this hobby.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. What amazes me about PixInsight is general, there's so much free stuff out there that you can use that's perfectly free. The only thing that's not free are tools like RC Astro, but those tools I feel are essential to processing your data.
right,
I mean,
right.
you don't have to. There are other ways to do it, but to me, that was the best investment I ever made in addition to PixInsight. But the fact that Bill and Frank from SETI Astro and Mike Cranfield, they spent a lot of time developing this stuff. It's not an easy thing to do. I've developed a friendship with Bill online. He'll send me stuff to play with. Some of his earlier scripts, I was playing with it as he was developing it and giving him my feedback. So I'm glad I was part of the process. And I'm just very grateful that we have people like Bill and Mike and Frank that, develop all this stuff for us. So, yeah, like I said, buy him a cup of coffee if you're going to use this stuff. It's well worth it, in my opinion.
Well done, David. Thank you.
No problem. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay,
Well,
well,
I will if no one else. uh, I saw something there on one of the scriptlets for hue angle. What the heck is
yes.
hue angle?
Yeah, that just allows, I'm trying to figure out screen share. I'm going to turn this, well, let me go back to it. Can you still see what I'm doing here?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so the hue angle is just like the hue on a color wheel. Think of it that way. You're just adjusting the hue. So you want to make it more green or more bluish. It's like anything else. That's what it's designed to do to use for. He's set up them by default to be the correct hue angles as they're called. But it's up to you whether you want to change them or not. Does that explain it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now if there are any further questions, but hope it was worthwhile to everybody here. If you have OSC or one-shot color, this is very useful for me from the standpoint of being able to combine the two different filter images together. If you're running mono with a filter wheel, then you just bypass that step and you treat it like any other SHO image. Bill also has a scriptlet that allows you to combine the RGB channels together. So you could also use that if you wanted to and try that, experiment with that, or use just a standard channel combination. You can go either way with that.
Well, he's got other scriptlets in there that are targeted at the mono side.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
LRGB combination, HA combination,
Right.
things like that.
And I have used the LRGB combination stuff. Depending on the image, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But, I'm a newbie at this. And when I get images or data sets from like Telescope Live, where they by default include the luminance channel, I say, okay, well, let me see what I could do with this. And I found myself when you use it in the non-linear mode, it works a lot better. And especially for galaxies, it'll give it a little bit more pop to it by using the luminance channel. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but it can be very useful.
Okay, well, that certainly gives us something to play with going forward.
Great.
Any other questions for David?
No questions from me, but just want to thank you for explaining this to us because I haven't really looked into the tool set, and now I know I've got to spend some time understanding what will help me with my one-shot imaging.
Yeah.
So
Right.
a lot of really good tools.
Yeah, and on his video, if you go through his video, if you're not in the pixel math, you can just bypass that section until he gets to using the scriptlets. If you do have pixel math scripts and you're into writing that kind of stuff, then you can start at the very beginning of his video. He actually used my data set that I just showed you for the Rosette Nebula as part of his video demonstration on using the combination of the two different data sets. Because he contacted me once and asked me if I had any one-shot color images using those two different filter sets, and I sent them to him.
Okay.
All right.
Just a couple of announcements. Our next meeting for December will be Monday, December the 15th. If you have topics that you would like to see discussed, or if you would like to discuss, please contact either myself or Jeff to let us know if what you're interested in and whether or not you'd be willing to lead the discussion. If you're going to submit images for the bulletin, again, I ask you to send those along to me and try to make them 10 megabytes or less so I don't have to reduce them before I pass them along to the editor of the bulletin. And if you are submitting images that you'd like to see show up in the bulletin, it's helpful if you could include some basic information about the image, like the camera, scope, filter, and exposures. Some of you send along your AstroBin link, but many times it doesn't have all of the necessary information to make it easy to put into the bulletin. So again, think about that if you're submitting images for the bulletin. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, David, and we'll see you next month.
Great. Have a good night. Clear skies, hopefully.
Thanksgiving all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.